Hi guys, we're almost there. We're just about to get started with learning cloud computing. But before we do that, I've just got one more thing I want to teach you. So I want you to understand about legacy IT or traditional IT. So this is really the operating model of IT before cloud computing became really popular. And it really helps you to understand the differences and the advantages of the cloud and why people might want to move their company infrastructure into the cloud. So on your screen here, you can see an example of a corporate data center. And in that corporate data center, we have a lot of IT infrastructure. So we have servers for applications, we have storage servers, we have routers and switches and firewalls, backup systems, and there's a lot more. There could be huge amounts of different infrastructure you require in order to provide IT services from your own data center. Now, what actually is the data center? Well, it's a building somewhere, and in that building, you have a series of racks, and that's where you house all this IT infrastructure. And a data center is really not a cheap thing or an easy thing to build and maintain. So it's often a dedicated building with dedicated rooms, and you have to have special air conditioning systems, you have to have redundant power supplies, you have to have redundant networking coming in for connectivity, and lots of infrastructure to make sure that your services run and are secure, and you want to reduce any risk of any impacts from things like fire happening or outages from a power supply provider, for instance. So a company will typically lease space in a data center, or they could own the whole building. So if you're a big enough organization, you might have built your own data center. And that really is an expensive thing to build, and it's also quite expensive to maintain as well. So what a lot of companies will do is they'll lease some space in somebody else's data center. So you might have a data center provider, and you've just leased a certain amount of space. So maybe you've got these 4 racks here and you put all your equipment in there. You might even have a cage to segregate your racks so that no one can physically come up and touch your equipment. So you might lease your space, but it's still going to be expensive. And you've still got to maintain and operate all this infrastructure. So the actual IT equipment itself is likely to be owned by your company. So you've had to purchase all of this equipment, and then you need to make sure that you manage that equipment. So firstly, from a capital perspective, this is very expensive. You have to purchase a lot of equipment, and that's a lot of investment upfront in cash, which you have to expend. So that's a CapEx heavy operating model. You also need to connect your corporate office and then have the staff who are going to design, build, operate, and manage the equipment. Now, of course, not all of that goes away in the cloud, but there's a lot of overhead with legacy IT in terms of things such as installing the equipment in the data center and building it and then operating it. And some of those costs do go away in the cloud. Now, it might not sound like much installing, for instance, a server into a rack in a data center, but actually it can be a huge project because you've got production systems which you can't take the risk that you might plug it into a network or cause an issue. You might accidentally knock a power supply out and take a system down. So often it can take a lot of planning and a lot of cost in terms of just getting a new application, a new set of servers into a data center. And then you've got to make sure that you back up your systems. So you need to have a backup system for copying your data. You need to constantly do testing on that to make sure that it's working as expected. And you need to secure your systems and maintain your own security. So there's quite a lot going on there. So what are the costs of having your own infrastructure in your own data center? Well, you've got the data center building. You might lease that, but it's still quite a bit of a cost. You've got data center security staff. You've got physical IT hardware that you've got to purchase. You've got your software licensing costs, your maintenance contracts, your power costs, and your internet connectivity. And then, of course, you've got your staff. So you've got more staff to manage this infrastructure because there's so many things that you need to do because you're taking full control of your entire IT infrastructure. So that's what we call legacy IT or traditional IT. It doesn't mean it's gone away. It's used in many companies. In fact, many companies find that they still prefer this for certain applications to run them in their own data center where they have more control. And there are some reasons why you might want to do that going forward. But they also find that the cloud is really good for other applications, so they might use both models. And we'll talk about that more later in the course.